All right. If you don't know me, hello. My name is Jackie Werner, and I am the Scholarly Communications and Research Librarian here at the Philadelphia campus. And today I'm going to be talking to you about research impact. So, how familiar are all of you with research impact? If you want to just unmute yourself or type in the chat.
Not too familiar for me.
Got it. Anyone else? All right, well, today, impact factor and citations. Yes, so I'm going to be going over the basics of research impact in this presentation, including what it is and how you can find the research impact of your and others' research. All right, so there we go. Let's start the presentation here. So, research impact, as defined by the University of York Research Impact Statement, which I thought summed it up pretty well, is when the knowledge generated by our research contributes to, benefits, and influences society, culture, our environment, and the economy. And another way I like summing it up is what your research means beyond a line on your CV. How does it impact the collective knowledge of your field and all academic fields? How does it impact culture beyond your field? Who is reading your research and how are they building on it? So, how do you measure impact? Impact as a whole is inherently subjective. So, what we do is measure the markers of it. The more papers cite another paper, the more that paper is having an impact on the field, the more people are clearly reading and building on that work. And even past that, the more conversation there is in Twitter, the more mentions there are in the news, the more real world, say, drugs that are being pushed out, the more these ideas have disseminated outside academia and made a real impact on the world. So, there are four major impact categories that I'm going to be covering today. First one is journal level impact, aka how much do articles published in this journal have an impact? Author level impact, on average, how much impact does this author's works have? Level impact, how much impact has this specific article had? And Altmetrics, which is a new and different way of measuring impact that covers all three of these. All right, so throughout this presentation, I'm going to use this very relevant publication as an example. And this is an article on the safety and efficacy of the Pfizer COVID vaccine. And it was published in the New England Journal of Medicine in December 2020. All right, let's start with journal level metrics. And this is probably going to be the longest part of the presentation because there are a lot of different ways of calculating the the impact of a journal. And if you've done any publication or looked into possible journals for publishing, you've almost certainly looked at some form of these journal level metrics. And I'm sure there are even more factors out there, but the main ones we're going to be covering today are impact factor, eigenfactor, article influence score, site score, SciMago journal rank, and source normalized impact per paper. So let's go into the one that you've almost certainly heard of already, which is impact factor. This is probably the best known of all journal level measures of impact. And it is calculated by, it covers the frequency in which an average article in a journal has been cited over a time period. So impact factors, all of these factors are only going to be covering a specific period of time because impact factors can and do change. A new journal can become more prestigious as it gains interesting articles in the field, and impact factor can drop. There's always going to be a little bit of fluctuation, even for a journal whose impact stays steady. So this is calculated by over a certain time period, looking at the citations of articles in a journal, divided by the number of total articles published during that time. And one of the issues with impact factor is that you can't actually compare journals in different fields, which is not necessarily an issue, but just something to keep in mind. So, for instance, some fields are going to cite a lot more than others. So, if you look at, say, the New England Journal of Medicine, you really can't compare that to, like, obscure Shakespeare plays monthly. So if you want to pick a journal that's best for you, you're definitely going to want to stick to journals within the same field if you're looking at the impact factor. The other issue with impact factor is that it's not freely available, and PCOM unfortunately does not have access to it. It can be found in journal citation reports and in Web of Science, neither of which PCOM subscribes to. However, many journals are going to have their impact factor just on the journal websites. For example, this is a screenshot from the New England Journal of Medicine. It has the highest journal impact factor, 74.699, of all general medical journals. And that is an extremely high impact factor. I'd say most journals within medicine, you're going to be seeing more in the single digits. Journal of the American Osteopathic Association is around, like, I want to say 1.9, 2 point something. And the impact factor is not just basically the single number that means, is this journal a good fit for me or not? There are a lot of other things to consider, especially whether the journal is something specific or a good fit for your work. All right, so since we don't actually have access to impact factor, what are some things that we can look at? Other factors that we could look at are eigenfactor and the article influence score. And these are these you can go visit eigenfactor.org and find a journal search for both of these factors. And all of these factors are going to have the same general idea of impact factors, but they're all slightly different. For example, for eigenfactor, citations from influential journals are scaled higher. So if your article gets cited, if you have an article that's cited twice, but one of those citations is from the New England Journal of Medicine, then that might be that is considered more prestigious than, say, an article cited 3 times by some journals that people haven't heard of. And interestingly, this is scaled so that every journal in the journal citation reports adds up, the eigenfactor adds up to 100. So, for example, New England Journal of Medicine here has an eigenfactor of 0.682. This means it has 0.68% of influence for all journals combined in journal citation reports. And journal citation reports is going to get it should be getting all of the journals that you're looking at. Might not have, like, for example, the newest journals in there yet. But this is meant so you can compare different fields. So, for example, if you're published in Cell, then you can tell that that is going to get more influence and reach than something published in a completely different field. Article influence score is another factor. It's another similar factor. And this is normalized to 1. So you can tell if the average article influence score is 1, then you can easily tell, does this journal have a higher or lower AIS? And these are free on eigenfactor.org. At the end of the presentation, I'll provide a list of links to everything that I'm talking about. All right. Next up is are factors that can be found in Scopus. So Scopus has 3 major factors. This is Cite Score, SJR, or SciMago Journal Rank, and SNP, Source Normalized Impact Per Paper. And once again, these are similar to Journal Impact, and they're available on Scopus, which is a wonderful database that the library does have access to. And later on, if you've left PCOM, these are also freely available, which I haven't copied it down because we're all at PCOM now, but I could send you the link if you'd like to keep it for later. So Cite Score is the number of citations in the current year for articles published in the last 3 years, divided by total publications by that journal in the last 3 years. So this is looking for how are the citations made recently. This one, like impact factor, you can't compare across fields. SJR is once again similar to the Eigenfactor, in which citations from prestigious journals are weighted more. And SNP, Source Normalized Impact Per Paper, is the ratio of citation to the citation potential of field. So this is meant to counter the fact that different fields are a lot more likely to cite than others. For example, say you have general surgery and infectious diseases. As an example, we'll say general surgery does not cite other papers too much, while infectious diseases, you're going to have a list of 100 citations per paper. So if you publish a general surgery paper and you get 2 citations, that's going to be ranked higher because it means more to have citations in the field where they cite less. And SJR and SNP, you can compare journals across fields. And these are both available on Scopus, as I said. If we have time at the end, I can show you all how to compare journals. There's a really nice tool to get a chart that compares all of these different factors across however many journals you select, which is really nice if you're trying to choose between a few different journals. All right, before I get to author level metrics, are there any questions? All right, no, good. At the end, you could also ask if you think of something. All right, so author level metrics. Author level metrics are most important when you're looking for, say, promotion and tenure resources, applying to jobs, applying to residencies, etc. And these are going to cover the general research impact of specific people. And the most common of these is called H-index. There are also some covered by Essential Science indicators, which once again is a subscription service, but I'll give you the idea of that. And then some outside the box sources of metrics. So first off, H-index. If you've done any publication, you've probably heard of this. And what this is the number of papers an author has published that have H or more citations. So here's what here's an example of a graph from Scopus. An H factor of, what was this? I think it was, let's say 40, means that the author has published 40 papers that have 40 or more citations. And that's a pretty impressive H factor. I took this from the first author of the Pfizer vaccine article. And this is meant to measure both quality and quantity. The more papers you publish, the more you have, the more you'll have papers with a big impact. This can be found in Scopus and in Google Scholar. I'll tell you about some of the little issues with this later, though. One of those little issues is the caveat that these, when you find your H index from these sources, you have to make sure that what they are calculating from is actually yours. And some of the best ways to do that is to make sure that you have a researcher's profile. For example, if you have a common name or you've changed your name, it can be really difficult for Scopus, Google Scholar, any databases to connect all those papers together. So if you have a researcher ID, though, you can easily make sure that your papers are gathered in one place under your ID. So this is a screenshot of ORCID. It's an identifier that basically acts like a DOI for people. And so many journals are starting to require it if you're submitting. It takes just like 5 minutes to set up a basic one. Just go to ORCID, orcid.org, and just gives you the researcher number. You can also set up like a full profile on there and use it as a page for your research. The other thing you can do is edit your Scopus author profile. So Scopus makes author profiles for everyone in their database, and you could search your profile within Scopus. And then if you see anything that's not supposed to be there, anything that's missing, contact me and I could change that for you. All right, back to author level. Citation reports. This is one of the easiest ways to show what you've been doing. Just a report of how many citations your publications have gotten. And Scopus collects citation information for articles and for authors. This is the author whose H factor we looked at, Fernando P. Pollock, and metrics overview, over 5,000 citations, H index of 35. And here's a nice graph of all the trends. And I believe there's a similar thing in Google Scholar. Google Scholar tends to cast a wider net and find things that don't really belong to you, though. And finally, there's thinking outside the box. And Altmetrics will help with this, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. And even things that aren't traditionally cited can be really useful in showing off your real impact, because impact isn't just how many papers in your field are citing you. You can have a huge impact with conference presentations, data sets, patents, curricular materials, and conducting peer review for different journals. And this is a screenshot of the Digital Commons, to toot our own horn, where you could put up a lot of things that you wouldn't able to be able to find in databases. For instance, this is my profile. and I have a lot of my teaching works up here, as well as conference posters and presentations. All right, straight on to article level. So you'll notice that a lot of these are overlapping. And there are many places where you could find out how many citations a particular article has. So this is a screenshot from Scopus here. The Pfizer article has 279 citations in Scopus. You can also find number of citations in Google Scholar, on PubMed, and many journal websites. PubMed in particular has a tool called relative citation rates, which is making a metric out of the number of citations. You can combine article citation rate versus the expected citation rate for similar articles in the same field. And there's that's on the NIH website. There's a particular link for it, which I'll copy in the chat later. But also, in this image here, keep an eye on the, remember that 279 citations in Scopus. All right, here's an example of a screenshot of the article on the New England Journal of Medicine webpage. You'll notice that this has 418 citing articles as opposed to 279. So databases like Scopus and PubMed index citations by journals that are in their databases. So that is not going to catch everything. Scopus includes more journals than PubMed, and journal websites themselves and Google Scholar will include more citations than that. So if you're looking to get your number of citations right, I recommend looking at multiple sources. And the last thing we're going to be talking about is Altmetrics. It says article level, but this can also be applied to journals and authors. And Altmetrics is trying to get that impact beyond straight citations and beyond academia. And now that so much of scholarly communication is online, now more so than ever with the pandemic, there are so many different metrics we can find to prove impact. Some of the Altmetrics usually looked at are views and downloads on papers or full text views, bookmarks and exports on sites such as Mendeley, RefWorks, etc., social media shares, Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, a whole bunch of other sites, and media mentions. And some type of altmetrics are often found on many different databases and journal sites. Two of the major ones you'll probably see are Altmetrics and PlumX. This screenshot is PlumX metrics. This is a screenshot from Scopus, where it covers things like not only citations, but also mentions in blogs, 712 mentions in the news, since this is the vaccine that is obvious. And then you have social media shares, likes, and comments, and tweets about this. And if a specific website doesn't include the metrics that you want, Altmetrics, its full database is not freely available. But you can get the free resource of an Altmetrics bookmarklet. And that you can install that in your browser, and that'll let you find information on any sort of paper with a DOI. But since I mentioned papers with a DOI, Altmetrics are also a really good way to find impact for those outside the box suggestions we talked about, like presentations, teaching works, etc. The PCOM Digital Commons includes PlumX statistics, and just a lot of different websites are going to have some view of Altmetrics. And that's a great thing to include when you're making a lot of impact more than is supported by citation counts. All right, and finally we have further resources. And I will get to my notes to copy all these in chat. And these are all things I talked about. Also, Tufts Library has a really good research guide on everything I talked about. And the first link is the slides for this presentation. All right. Let me stop sharing and figure out how to see my notes on this screen. There we go. All right. So while I find the chat, do you have any questions?
This is Winston down in South Georgia. I have two brief questions. Thank you.
Yes.
Excellent presentation. One, what impact does translation of your article have on the impact factors if it's translated into multiple languages? And two, on the commercial side, what factors do advertisers look at in terms of deciding whether they're going to buy pages in your journal?
That's a very good question. And I don't actually know the answer to either of them offhand. For advertisements in the journal, I would think that journal impact is probably going to be a major factor of what they look at because it is the most well-known view of just the more citations you have, obviously, the more people are seriously reading your journal. So it's a good measure to show how many eyes you're going to be getting on your work. And as for your first question, I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
What impact does translation of your article in multiple languages have on the impact factor?
That's a good question. I believe that would still be considered under the original article. So I would think it would have more, since it has more reach, it would have more impact. But I am not 100% sure. So let me look that up for you because that's a really interesting question.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anyone else have questions? All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending. You can find the slides for this presentation on the first link in the list of links, and also it'll be on the library YouTube. Should be within the week. All right. So have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll all be vaccinated and seeing each other in person soon. Bye.